Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another panel episode. This is the series in which we discuss some of the most pressing and important conversations that are happening in the climate farmers community. And in this episode, we're going to talk about transforming waste streams into forms of wealth and value that can help to propel farm enterprises. Now, I had a little bit of a difficulty getting the recording to start on time, so I lost the beginning of Annetta Mueller's introduction. But to fill you in, she works with Fattoria La Viala in Tuscany in Italy, a 1,000-hectare biodynamic farm that has a number of mixed enterprises, and I'll let her take it over from here.
We also have 1,000 hectares of forest, and we're biodynamic, so we're a regenerative farm, also starting with some syntropic elements on our farm. And when we started, well, we're now in our almost in our fifth decade. And when we started, the idea was really to always try and close the cycle. So instead of just doing another wine estate or just an olive grove, from the beginning, we kind of started to have all the different elements. So for example, we have animals such as sheep, cows, and chickens, more important, but we also have vegetable patches. Obviously, we make wine, we make olive oil, and we also make sauces. So we have from the vegetable patches. And the idea was not to just grow everything, but also to transform it and then to work directly with the end consumer. And in doing so, one of the elements, and in a way, it's what nature actually teaches us. Nature doesn't do waste. And so a lot of times when we have, some aspects are really easy. For example, when we make our tomato sauces, obviously when we're selecting the fruits, there's always some cutoffs. So that's easy. We use that on our compost. But then there were some other elements, such as we added a phytodepuration, so a plant depuration, where we can filter through all the gray waters, which we then use again to water the fields. And then it started over 10 years ago. We started looking into when you make olive oil. I don't know if everybody is familiar with the process of making olive oil, but at the end, you basically have an emulsion of olive oil and olive fruit water. And then you separate the two. And then the olive fruit water, we used to actually have to compost quite painstakingly, because it was a waste that you couldn't just put on the field. And so we started looking into that and realized that actually the olive fruit water has 20 times the amount of polyphenols than the actual olive oil. And so we started research on that. And then at some point we started making first a natural supplement, and then later on also turned it into cosmetics. And that then led to another idea to also use from the winemaking, the grape seeds, which you can obviously make grappa from, but we also started using those for our cosmetics. And so it continues. So we always try and look, okay, where are we producing waste that we're not utilizing, and how can we cycle it into something that is usable?
Brilliant. Thank you, Annetta. And Alfred, can you give us an idea about how you integrate waste streams into the production and the fertility of your farm?
Yeah, we are using not everything as a waste stream. So but we have a composting and vermicomposting facility, and we are not perfectly in closing the loop, because we sell the compost and vermicompost as a product, as an additional product, and use mainly seed coating or seed priming for incorporating it back, except of the market garden that we have. So there we also use a lot of compost and mulch also as well. So we are based near Vienna, about 60 kilometers northwest of Vienna in Austria. We are an organic farm. We converted in 2006, so we're celebrating 20 years now in June. And beside of the farm, we have a second company, which is Produkte. It's limited, and we outsourced it 17 years ago from the farm and started the new company together with my business partner, Leopold Fischer. And there we produce peat-free soil substrates and vermicompost, or not we produce the vermicompost. The vermicompost is produced by the earthworms. Why is that important? Because we as humans, we cannot make soil. It's only nature who can do it. And therefore, we always try to explain this also to our audience. And what we do now with vermicompost is, on one side, we add it to the peat-free soil substrates, but we also make liquid products out of it, compost teas, compost extracts that we use in the garden, but mainly for seed priming and seed coating that we incorporate back into the farm. We
Fascinating.
are, okay.
Go ahead.
The farm is not only a production farm, so we produce food on the farm, but we are also a research and demonstration farm. We are part of the Global Network of Lighthouse Farm, and there we do a lot of research activity to increase soil health. This is one pillar. Then agroforestry and market gardening. These are the three pillars, actually.
And so you've made the waste streams both from your farm, and can I assume you're bringing in some waste streams from other places too to reach production goals with the compost?
Yeah, we use the lucerne hay from our farm for composting. Unfortunately, we have no cows, so we can only compost. The lucerne would be much better to first feed it to the cows and then use the manure. But there are always things that you can improve. And so we use the lucerne, we make a thermophilic composting process, and we use green waste from the village, so garden waste really. And we compost these two things together, make a thermophilic compost, which is sieved, and then we feed the compost to the earthworms where they produce the vermicompost.
Fantastic. So yeah, multiple stages there and a couple of different feed sources. Now back to Aneta, can you outline each of the main sort of closed loops that you've created on the farm there with the team in order to make use of what were previously waste products that now you've been able to find more value with?
Yes, of course.
There's a lot of them, I know.
So I think what's important, so for us, what's important, as I said before, since we don't only produce vegetables, olives, and so forth, but also transform them, I think that gives us also an idea how we can, or more possibilities to keep on closing loops. But the idea, as I mentioned before, is really to look at nature and see, okay, nature doesn't produce waste. So what resources do we have and how can we close the loop, right? And so, for example, easy example, the sheep, we obviously have sheep because we make pecorino cheese, but we also have sheep because we also have an agriturismo, so for the guests, for the meat, but we also have the sheep because they're great in fertilizing the soil, such as, I don't know now the word for it, but they go to different places. So, you have that added aspect of raising the fertility of the soil. And so also their droppings, we use also again in the compost. Then in terms of the olive fruit water, that I think is the most exciting example for it because it truly was a waste product. And we actually did a lot of research. And what we do now is we basically, through reverse osmosis, basically the water that remains is first cleaned and then it's concentrated. And then in the end, we have the concentrated olive fruit water and ultra pure olive water. So from the concentrated olive fruit water, we make the natural supplement, olefinolia it's called. So these are health shots. And then with the ultra pure water, we make most of the cosmetics. So basically in cosmetics, one of the main ingredient actually is water. And there we don't use normal water, but we use the water from the olive fruit. So there's a lot more minerals in it than before. So that's one big stream. And the same is happening with the grapes. So obviously we make wine. And at some point, obviously the grape skins and the grape seeds are being taken out, especially for the red wine. And then that waste before we just put on the compost or made grappa with part of it. But now we're actually using it as a scrub, for a scrub for a body scrub, a facial scrub. And again, we're also now extracting it and making it into resveratrol, which we're then again using for the cosmetics. So that's another aspect of it. And then, yeah, I think that's about it. That's what comes to mind right now. Obviously, the wastewater system is the same. I mean, obviously, we do try to be as conscientious about natural resources. So we obviously try to not waste any water, but of course, we do use water in all the different production areas. And in order to be able to recuperate that water, that's why we put in the plant depuration and with a big, basically, pool where then it's stored and then we can reuse it again for watering.
Mm-hmm. Like you said, it's a real asset to have post-production on the farm as well, because many people still mostly export raw products and they never see the discarded portions, which they could otherwise use. And so by keeping that in-house, you have control over what would otherwise be waste streams and open up opportunities to reincorporate them into aspects of the business.
Yes. And I think it's also added value, because obviously it's one thing if you sell fresh fruit and vegetable, but the minute you're able to transform it, you add shelf life, and also you can then also ship it, transport it much easier than, just fresh vegetables and fruit. And so, yeah, that was from the beginning, that was the idea, to really see, because if you translate the word fattoria from Italian, it was really always just the idea behind the fattoria was kind of a self-sufficient farm. So, before, farmers would always, and still today, they don't just store the fresh products, but they would, in the summer, they would make in the tomatoes into passata or sauces for the winter time. And that is really the main idea behind Fattoria La Viala, to be really as self-sufficient as possible in everything that we do. And that adds also the waste streams.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And Alfred, can you tell me about how the idea of transforming the waste streams that you had on your farm or the unused product into compost and the setup of that operation came about?
Well, that's a bit of a fun story. I was in a winemaker school when I was young, and there we learned about composting, because at that time the Lower Austrian government decided not only to collect or to separate. So the citizens in Lower Austria should not only separate the paper and the glass and the metal, but as well the organic waste. And therefore they asked the teachers of the schools to train the young farmers to do composting, because they wanted to have the composting taking place decentralized all over Lower Austria on the farms. And actually that this idea also happened that way, and it is still that way around. But so we were trained to do composting, thermophilic composting. And I was always fascinated by the heat that's generated. That's why I thought, okay, why not use the heat for heating a building or a swimming pool or whatever. So at that time, the internet came up, and I approached the internet and tried to find out which technologies are available. And what always popped up was vermicomposting. And I didn't have any clue, but once there was written on the screen, vermicompost, the best compost of the world. So I thought, okay, let's give that a look. And I ordered some books and literature from the USA, because it was coming from there. And then I visited, together with a friend, I visited earthworm farmers in California for 1 or 2 weeks. And what we also did is that we visited the University of Berkeley, and they already had research going on. And that was really fantastic to hear what they would say. And they mentioned that they can reduce the landfill volume when they separate the organic waste, and then they can convert it to an organic fertilizer. And even reduce the pesticide application because the plants become healthier. So I was really fascinated. And when I came back, I approached the Life Science University BOKU in Vienna and asked a lot of questions at the Institute of Zoology and the Institute of Soil Research. And so we started to do research together with them, and so the things progressed and progressed. They were interested in our experience. We were interested in the basic their knowledge, and with the research that we did, we quickly found out how powerful the vermicompost is. So we did, for example, research on industrial contaminated sites where they applied wood safener for like 20 years. And the wood safener, the painting always dropped onto the floor or onto the ground, and there was nothing growing there anymore. And then we made compost extracts and applied it, or the scientists applied it there for 1 year, 5 times within 1 year. And after 1 year, they took the samples and made research, and they found out that we could remediate, or we could destroy the level of this pesticide or of this wood safener, wood painting, by 60%. It was really crazy. And the growth came back, and they checked out the microbes, and the microbial diversity increased. So it was really amazing to see. And then we did research with the horticultural school in Austria, where they also applied the compost tea. And then they checked the availability of potassium and phosphorus. And they saw an increase by the time that the availability of nutrients was always higher where they added the compost tea compared to where the compost tea was not added. And so we were really happy about the results and continue to do research and so on.
Now, you've also been running this operation for quite a while. How has your vermicomposting operation, plus what you do with the other composting steps, evolved as you've refined your system?
Actually, it became more natural with the time, and the management was easier, because at the beginning it was really, really difficult. So it took us 10 years to become, or 15 years to become profitable. And this was only possible because we did it alongside of the farm, because otherwise we would have went bankrupt, or would have had to stop it after 1 or 2 years when you don't make a profit. So that gave us the time to develop everything. And I think that's quite the thing, because I always observed the vermicompost market all over Europe, because it's my business. And so you always see when someone pops up, and after 2 years they disappear again. And then the next one pops up with a brilliant vermicomposting idea, and after 2 years they also disappear. So that's really interesting to observe. It seems not to be that easy to manage such a facility at the end.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's a difficult market for a lot of different reasons. So going back to Aneta, I would love to explore the thought and the design process behind putting in these reuse and transformation operations. How do you first go about finding where there is potential for a waste stream on the farm? And then, of course, the logistics and setting up how to actually make use of it is not as simple as like putting it into a bottle or throwing it into a compost pile, especially on the scale that La Viala is working with.
Well, so, okay, so for the compost, it's quite easy, right? So, I mean, we have huge compost heaps, so that's not a problem. For the sheep, a lot of it is just logic, following the logic of having a certain, I mean, that's what's grand when you have all the different aspects on the farm. You then do automatically have a certain circularity, and automatically by instinct find ways, just, I mean, silly things like, I mean, we make our own flour. We then have bran as a waste. So in the beginning, we tried to make some cookies from it. Nobody liked them. We don't make cereal, so it made no sense. So we give it to the chickens and the sheep, and it makes them very happy. with the olive fruit water, it was a little bit different but again, just one of those things where we're a family-run farm, and the oldest brother of the owner family, Johnny, he was watching a television show, a documentary on secondary plant compounds, and he, in his mind, kind of made the connection, also because their great-grandmother, Nonna Caterina, she actually, during olive harvest, she always drank the olive fruit water that remained. And everybody was always like, it tastes horrible. It does taste horrible. I mean, I do admit, super delicious drink there where you're like, yummy. It's very bitter. And she lived to be 98. And somehow that connection then think, secondary plant compounds, polyphenols. Olive oil is rich in polyphenols, but most polyphenols are actually water soluble. And so he called the scientist and talked to her. And so that's kind of how it started. And first we started with the natural supplement, and it's a lot of trial and error. And I mean, in a way, the mindset of La Viala is really, we don't start projects necessarily because we think they're profitable. We kind of start them because we're passionate about them and we want to know or learn something new. And that's how it was with the natural supplement. The first batches were, still made with grape juice, and then we made a bitter one, and now we have one that's actually with oranges also in it. And it's the same with the cosmetics. Basically, one of our clients, actually, since we work only with the end consumer, one of our clients actually wrote to us. He has a small cosmetics business, and he saw research that we had published. And he said, I saw this research, and I think this olive fruit water could also work very well from cosmetics. So it's always, synchronicities and just being open to possibilities. And just looking at, okay, where do we produce waste? And then look at what kind of waste is it, And a lot of times, I mean, it's trial and error. A lot of times we do something, it's for the bin kind of.
Mm-hmm.
But not getting discouraged helps us really. And people always think we have this grand master plan. We do not. We just stay open and listen to lots of different perspectives. And I think in a way, being in tune in nature and really being on the farm all the time, it automatically shows you certain things that maybe before you weren't aware of. So yeah, that's basically it. And then, of course, the whole design of, how should it be packaged? How should it be shipped and so forth? That's then a whole other process.
Well, that's partly what I wanted to know about, because it's one thing to have a curious idea and get some research to say that this will work. But much like you mentioned, this is an iterative process, and many of the ideas end up in the bin because they didn't work the way you had in your mind. And
Yeah.
that's difficult. I mean, La Viala is not a small farm, but it's not a huge business either. And operating in that in between, having an R&D department that you need to maintain and invest in, and no
Don't have,
R&D department is 100% successful in all their ideas, of course.
but no, we don't. I mean, actually, that's one of the things we don't. People always think we have an R&D department, but we do not. I mean, it's really us. We have very interesting working. I mean, we don't really have job descriptions when we have very, it's not something very fixed. So whenever somebody reads something that they think I mean, it's very team oriented in the sense, everybody pitches in. Everybody says, oh, I saw this and I think this might be really cool, or we should try this. And then we just go from there and try and see which are the things that could work out best. And with the olefinolia, it was really Gianni that kind of pushed it. And it's not like it's like this huge success, but it's, for example, I'm addicted to it, the health shots. I mean, I always take them. And the research is great. I mean, it's amazing. And yeah. And then since we are, I mean, very close knit, I mean, also then the design, why do we use health shots and not one big bottle? Automatically you ask questions and then you get certain answers. And I think the one thing, or that what is the most difficult part is being able to ask the right questions. I think that's an art form. And yeah, and so it helps that we're quite open and also listening to outside people. And yeah, because we don't have an R&D department per
I
se.
got you. So it sounds like more of an internal
Nice to have
culture.
one. Would be nice to have one, but we don't.
Yeah. But no, that sounds like you've replaced an R&D department with a work culture that allows people to tinker with and constantly try and improve the aspects of the parts that they work on, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I want to go back to Alfred and talk about the mentality that also creates these iterations and these improvements and these changes over time. I mean, you wouldn't still be in the composting business this many years on if you weren't constantly tinkering and improving your system as well. And you've got multiple stages of your compost. So maybe walk me through how those have developed and how you're thinking about this in order to make it into a product that you can sell.
Yeah, well, sure, we have tried to improve the vermicompost itself, but this is, as I always try to explain, it's a nature-based solution. So it's something that nature has done for hundreds of millions of years, and I wouldn't dare to improve it or to say I can make it better, because I don't think I have the capacity and the knowledge and to improve a process that has developed over hundreds of millions of years. But on the other side, what we can improve, or what we try to improve, is to provide the perfect conditions for the system to run. So one thing that we have improved over the time is the food stock that we provide to the worms. So we have improved it in a way so we can make more fungal dominated vermicompost now as well. Not only because normally scientists say, okay, the vermicompost is more bacterial dominated, and we have improved the food for the earthworms. We are now also working on, we did some trials to add biochar, for example, which is also a great resource. And we have done some research where we can see it's really amazing, the results. We did some master thesis on that. And now we also made a crazy project last year where we tried to convince or negotiate with the earthworms actually to make them transporting biochar into the subsoil on the field. So not the vermicomposting earthworms, but the earthworms that are in the field. And yeah, negotiating was not so successful, but we still convinced them to do that, and it works actually. So we had a student there last year who did some trials, and we could make the biochar attractive for the earthworms actually.
Very interesting. Sounds to me that the collaboration with the research projects brings in fresh ideas and new investigations all the time. Has that led to improvements in the system itself or opportunities for new products?
Yeah, definitely opportunities for new products. The ideas are not so much coming from science. They are more coming from our farm, from ourselves. But then we incorporate science and tell them what we would like to see, what are the challenges that we are facing, what are the ideas, the innovations that we have in mind. And then they can do the research. So at the end, if it's successful or if it's not successful, we can always claim that the research was not done by ourselves, but by serious researchers, because that's really important.
Yeah, I know academia likes that as well. I'm curious, just from a personal standpoint, the process of going from thermophilic compost, which usually is bacterial dominant, right? And then changing the diet of the worms to produce a fungal dominant compost. How was this just trial and error until you started to get a result that looked good under a microscope, or how are you gauging these changes?
No, it's actually what I try to do is thinking like an earthworm. So what would the earthworm make happy actually? What would they make happy to have as an environment? And then because you cannot do it the other way around, actually. The earthworm, the vermicomposting process is you're really depending on the earthworms. If they don't like it, they just move on. They stop breeding, they just move out of the system. Whatever you do, you cannot really stop them. So you have to have an environment that they like. Otherwise, you won't be successful. You cannot push the food into the earthworm. That's not possible. If they don't like it, you've lost, actually. So I really try, and I always consider myself trained by earthworms because I never was at the university. I never studied, but I always try to think, okay, when I would be an earthworm, what would I like to see? What would I like to have as an environment? And I think that's maybe an approach that could work for if you like nature-based solutions.
I really love that because that is also how I approach problem solvings on my farm, where I don't have an academic background and I'm not very confident putting research, but if you can form a relationship with an indicator species, and especially in this case, the earthworms are your primary species that you're taking a look at, and luckily they're large enough compared to other soil microbes that you can observe them in your hand instead of having to get a microscope out, shows that not only have you really stopped to pay attention to the life forms that you're taking care of, but you've bothered to take a relationship-based approach instead of just looking at the metrics and the numbers. I really like that. Now, Annette, I want to come back to how this concept of using a waste source comes into fruition and navigates the difficulties of actually turning it into a business, because I would imagine there's quite a few people who are taking a look at this through different parts of the process. And it's one thing to transform a waste stream into value, and another is to educate a public that maybe has never heard of these products, where it's valuable and why they should take it seriously.
Yeah, so I mean, that is obviously challenging. And I guess we're lucky in the sense that because we work with the end consumer directly, so we're directly in touch with, I mean, they only buy from, Laviala, you cannot find anywhere but at Laviala or online from Laviala. And so that's actually a super interesting and grand relationship. In the end, it's about relationship, as Alfred was saying it. And so when we first came out, obviously we made people try it and had varying degrees of satisfaction or non-satisfaction. And then we go from there, and obviously there's a lot of, I mean, we do also work with researchers. So, we did some research and we published some of the research. And we found out, as a company, you're not allowed to publish research on your homepage. It's a learning process. But I think it does help that we have direct contact on the farm. Obviously, people come stay with us, people come visit us, we talk to them. And it's the same with the cosmetics. And then, of course, it's also having a long breath. It's not like we're selling them like hotcakes, but believing in something and continuing also then to explore, what do these health shots actually do? And then people come and say, I would be really interested in researching this. Or client cells, for example, we have this facial serum, right? That is 90% really based on products from Laviala, which is incredible, or 93% actually. And so people were using it for the face, and it's brand. And then all of a sudden we get all these emails. Oh yeah, so I've been using your serum on my hair and it's incredible. My hair is regrowing, and so we looked into that because we're like, okay. And so then we developed, putting the serum in your hair is maybe a little bit more difficult, but I mean, we had really several emails from that. I don't know how they ended up putting in their hair, but they did it. And then we actually started to develop something a bit more fit for hair. So now we have a hair tonic that seems to be working. And it's really like this, that sometimes we have the ideas, but sometimes it's really the clients that have an idea and tell us, oh, why don't you try this? Or, a lot where we're like, yeah, thank you very much. It's very kind of you. And then we discard it. But a lot of the things, and that's how it, you have to be really flexible. And I think in a way it goes with how agriculture is. I mean, agriculture, cultivating something, you always need this incredible amount of just passion and just in a way longevity, and not being frightened or not, closing up, but just really continuing to learn from what's happening in nature, especially in these times. And I think that is really the mindset then. I don't know if that answers the question you had.
It does. I mean, there are so many other aspects of this that we can explore. We can go more technical. We can look at the level of communication that you've cultivated with your client base, because it sounds like a ton of feedback and ideas have come from that too. Very similar to the relationship that Alfred has been observing with his earthworms. You've been
Yes.
observing with the feedback from the customers as well.
Yeah.
Man, there's so many directions I can go with this. So, Alfred, I'm also very curious as to where you see opportunities perhaps to integrate other waste sources from farms around you, because I would imagine you're one of the few that are properly making use of what are otherwise throwaway resources or things that people otherwise try and get rid of, or I don't know, have difficulty managing. Do you see the opportunity to bring in waste sources from other places, or to get composting operations set up in other farms near you? Have we got you
Well,
there?
definitely, there is a lot of opportunity when you about vermicompost. Is frozen? Now are you back?
Yes,
Can
we've
you
got
hear
you.
me?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I think there is a lot of different opportunities that we can use, kind of manure that you could use, even biogas, digestate, and then mixes of different uses. So you can use everything that's organic to feed on earthworms. Not everything you can feed pure, but then you can mix it in with other stuff. Some stuff has to be pre-composted to make sure the earthworms are comfortable with it. And yeah, so that's really depending on the material that you use. Yeah, I think there is a lot of opportunities, even waste, kitchen waste or things like that. But that should be pre-composted and should go through a thermophilic phase for hygienic reasons, actually.
Okay. And so, like you said, the worms can be pretty finicky. Do you see a lot of risk in sourcing feed material from other places that perhaps you haven't filtered through first, or that could have contamination, which could, let's say, wipe out a population, depending on how it's handled?
Typically, the earthworms can handle a lot of stuff, especially if it's like there's a risk on E. coli or something like that. But legally, it's a problem. So that's one reason why we do a two-step process. So to have a product first. So we make a thermophilic process, and then we go from waste status to product status, and then we go on. It wouldn't be necessary all the time, but yeah, it depends. Sometimes it's temperature for temperature reasons. So you have something that would get warm anyway. Yeah, like, okay, I put grass clippings on top and feed the earthworms. The earthworms would be very happy with it in the first place. But as soon as they start to heat up, then you would kill your earthworms. So therefore, it's always good then to throw the grass clipping first and through the composting process. And then when it cools down, then feed it to the earthworms only. Yeah? So there are several reasons. If you have something with a lot of weed seed in it, then you definitely wouldn't go through the vermicomposting process, because the vermicomposting doesn't kill the weed seed. So you always have to think about what is my resource. If you have something that's super high in potassium or in pH level or super low, this could also be difficult. So therefore, mixing it with other stuff or pre-composting it is always a good idea. It's also for homogenizing the stuff. pre-composting is really good for softening it, so the earthworms can approach it much faster. So there are several reasons why you do pre-composting or other treatments first.
Sure, that makes a lot of sense. I would imagine the bureaucracy or the regulations around composting can be a little tricky to navigate. It's what I've heard from friends of mine that have been difficulties in trying to set up similar businesses. Have you mostly gotten through that by working with the authorities, or have they had to catch up to your systems since you're one of the first people around you who really turned it into much of a business?
Yeah, true. So we had some issues at the beginning. They didn't want to let it happen on the farm, because the normal composting process always has to be between two villages. So as much distance as possible between where people live, because of the smell, because of the emissions. When you turn the compost, so you blow a lot of microbes into the air. People were afraid about it. Mostly the smell was a huge topic. So the authority always placed the composting facilities far away from any village, as far away as possible. And when we started our vermicomposting business in the village on the farm, they were a bit worried. But then we invited them and said, okay, come here. You can see we are not turning anything, so there is no emission into the air. There is no water released or no excess fluid. So there can be no contamination of the groundwater. Everything is dry. There is no smell. There is no noise. So then they said, okay, it's okay. But they keep it more like animal system than composting, because they just don't know where to put it in which folder.
Yeah, of course. And so back to Aneta, I'm curious to know where else you see opportunities for transforming maybe what are currently waste streams or parts of inefficiencies in the farm that you would like to see turned into something more valuable. Are you still working on some things at the moment?
No, well, no, in terms of that, no, because currently we're really more concentrating on climate mitigation and resiliency. And we don't have another big project in the pipeline for waste stream, because, I think we quite efficient, or we've run out of ideas what else we could try and upcycle into something else. I'm sure, there are a million opportunities, but we don't see them right now. And so currently, really, our focus is more on introducing more successional agroforestry, especially in the vineyards, which then, could lead to another project, since we then will have a lot of aromatics. So, we might end up with a proxy wine, or, you never know.
Mhm.
But yeah, but currently, the focus is going more into, because, the climate changes are accelerating so much. And for a long time, because we are organic biodynamic, we were okay, but it's been now 3-4 years where we're starting to have problems, especially through the unpredictability, but also in terms of the wine. It's not just the high alcohol level because the temperatures are rising, but more than anything, it's that it's very difficult to have a good acidity, which you need in the wine. So
Mhm.
that's where we're currently putting our focus.
We'll have to get you on the next panel where we talk about climate and, weather vagrants mitigation. It's something that everybody's dealing with.
Really, I mean, this year it snowed in March. Last year it snowed in April. So, March is better than April.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it. I appreciate that.
But
So,
especially because we do have a very complex system, because we have, one, we're quite large. Two, we have so many different crops. The unpredictability makes it really difficult to organize the work. I mean, before, everybody always said, oh, Demeter on that kind of, that scale is impossible. It was super possible. But now that scale, it makes it, because one work came after the other. Right now, a lot of times, everything is happening at once. And also, yeah, in the vineyards, olive groves, whatever crops, that it's just very difficult to, especially when, being regenerative and not using, especially with Demeter, you're using very little and you have to really, look at how to do it.
Sure, it's a little bit more of a limited toolbox, which you've committed to and for good reasons, but it can sometimes be a limitation too when you're trying to adapt really quickly.
Yeah, exactly.
Would you give any advice to, or perhaps encourage other farmers to think about how to transform the different waste streams that perhaps you see all around you that are not very well utilized? I can think of, in olive and wine production, the prunings are usually either left or burned. Do you have examples like that where you see
Well, of course,
opportunities?
yeah. I mean, we don't burn our prunings, obviously. We basically wood chip them. Well, I mean, all the branches, they're basically, I can't think of the English word right now, when you kind of make them small, right? And we
Yeah,
leave them
chip
in
them, yeah.
we chip them in the and leave them in the olive grove. Same for the wines. I mean, the prunings we don't burn. And yeah, I think it's always interesting, but I think every farmer does that, to really look, to look at the farm as a system, as an organism, maybe better than a system, an organism, that's alive and that's breathing. And what does this organism need? And so I think it's always an opportunity to see what kind of waste streams do I have? How can I, transform them into something that's valuable to me? Same with any kind of production. I think, yeah, transformation to me is one of the, and I understand it's very difficult if you're a smaller farmer. I mean, La Viala has existed for almost 50 years, and it's not like we were big overnight. It was a very organic growth. But the idea behind it was always, okay, what's missing? How can we be more complete? And I think looking at that, how can you be more complete, or maybe even how can you, look for collaborations that, what you're doing and what you're not using might be really essential or valuable to somebody else. So I think that's how I would look at it.
Indeed. That's a great idea. So, Alfred, same question to you. Knowing that there are waste streams that have not been really utilized, I'm sure you see them all around you as well. What advice would you give to someone who's dealing with a waste product that is currently a burden and how they might be able to think about or transform that to accelerate or improve their own operations?
Yeah, we have maybe a quite a good example. At one of my neighboring villages, there is a straw heating facility who is heating more or less half of the village. And they're burning all the straw there. And now they realize, okay, this straw might be missing on the fields after 25 years doing it. Because first, when they started this operation, everyone clapped and everyone said, wow, that's cool to reduce fossil fuel dependency and you do it with your own resources. But now they realize, oops, that might be problematic because that carbon is really missing on the fields. And then the farmers get some ash back, which is nothing actually. That doesn't really make sense. And so I would have some ideas about it. So instead of burning it, it would be cool to produce biochar out of it, and then you can still use some of the heat, but you would have biochar that you could incorporate back into the soil and even pimp it with the compost, mixing it into compost or pre-compost it, so to charge it with nutrients and microbes, and then bring it back on the field. So I think this would be a good example how they could really change the system or improve the system, actually, not really change it.
Fantastic. Well, look, we're just about out of time, but before I hand it over to listener questions, what do you think that most people should know that isn't often talked about the topic of composting, Alfred? What are some of the things that you have learned in setting this up as a business and kind of tweaking the system to get the results that you want that you think more people should be aware of?
I think especially from a farmer's perspective, vermicomposting might be a bit tricky often, but composting is a process that could be incorporated on a farm when you have a lot of resources quite easily. And you can even share a compost turner, for example, with others because it is not so time sensitive in the application. So that's something that can be organized in a village or even two villages. And I think the most important thing about making compost yourself is the quality. Because if you look at compost from waste streams, from real, not farming waste streams, but from collection, separate collection from kitchen waste or other things, the amount of debris that you find in such compost, like plastic and glass and metal and whatever you can imagine, is horrific. And the quality of the compost really, it doesn't improve your soil if you have like 20% plastic in your compost and you apply it on your farm. So I can only say be very careful about the compost that you apply. And if you make your own compost, your own, you do it either good or bad. Yeah, it's your own decision. If you say, oh, I like plastic in my compost, so you then throw it in and compost it and then apply it to a field. If you don't like it, you can also make a decision and say, no, I don't want to have this or that stuff in my resources. So that's really the most important thing. And what I also realized is that there even if you do not consider the quality, there is just not enough quantity of compost out there, because we always say, yeah, compost, it's great stuff, but where do you take it from? Yeah, even if you don't consider the quality to be important, even then it's nearly impossible, especially in the southern regions of Europe. It's just not available. So and I was always angry with myself because the vermicompost that we produced was too expensive for me to throw it on the land as a fertilizer. So considering the amount of nitrogen or potassium or whatever you have. So I was thinking about how can I reduce the amount of vermicompost and still have a benefit on my fields. And what we came up was the seed coating or seed priming method, where we can not deliver the carbon, definitely not, yeah, because we only use 1 liter per hectare, but we can definitely prime the seed. And then when the seed germinates and the taproot grows out of the seed, it takes some of the microbes, like we do it with soybean coating, priming. It takes some of the microbes, and the root then transports the microbes down into the ground, and at the same time starts feeding these microbes and selecting the microbes. And then so you can really bring back the biodiversity of microbes quite easily, even in a contaminated land or in a degraded land, and with very little effort. And if you do that a few years or constantly, then you can improve the biodiversity in your soil, and then the next generation of crop also gets the benefits from there.
Yeah, that's brilliant. I've heard from many soil scientists at this point about the benefits of using compost as a seed inoculant rather than trying to put it in quantity all over the fields. Oftentimes, it's not practical to create things at that quantity, and you can stretch this much farther if you use it as a seed inoculant or as an extract or a tea. Annette, one last question to you before we open it up to the group as well. I would love to know what you consider to be the challenges or the unique, I guess, circumstances of such a diverse enterprise that has multiple lines of food production that has its own post-production operation and many different feed sources, waste streams, and the dynamics between that. What should people who are trying to diversify their farm or maybe consider bringing in post-production into their operation have in mind about how to close these cycles before they start to generate waste?
Well, I think in a way, even though it sounds strange, but to keep it simple, you know what I mean? Whatever you do, try to always go back, not to complicate things, but always start from, okay, how can I simplify it? Even though I'm creating more complexity, even though that sounds maybe counterintuitive, but that's where we always go back. And I think that is really for us sometimes the most difficult part, because we have so many mobile parts that, you know, if there's one crink in the chain, you know, I mean, it has a big ripple effect. And that's why we always also try to, you know, how can we make it simpler? You know, how can we, in all this diversification, how can we be diverse, but also simple in a way? And so, and I think, at least for me and anything in life, that's when I get really into my head or things get really complex, to go back to how can I simplify it? And yes, it's a complex operation, but that's also what makes it so fascinating. So.
Of course, the dynamics of such a living environment and living work environment that supports it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Brilliant. Well, look, let's open it up there to listener questions. I can see some people chomping at the bit to. I'm going to assume, Stephen, you've got something?
Sure, I can hop in if that's all right. Well, Alfred, thanks so much for the conversation this evening. I've taken many notes, and I'm happy to have a conversation afterwards with my partner and see what we can implement. But maybe picking up on the last question, Oliver, if it's all right. Between the two of you, I mean, decades of experience, right, with utilizing waste streams here in your enterprises. And my partner and I, this is our first year of production. We're starting our farm here. And so I wanted to maybe take us back to when you were starting on the farm and think about what does that process look like for new farmers or farmers just getting started with introducing these techniques that you spoke about this evening. How would you do it again if you had to? What did you learn thinking about the financing, the role of experts, building infrastructure, finding new markets, et cetera? I'd love to hear just a little bit of insight in that regard. Thanks.
Yeah, who wants to take that one first? Alfred?
Yeah, okay, because my mic is already open. So I can start in. One thing that I just realized a few years ago is that, especially for the market garden, which is quite different to urban field farming, but especially for the market garden, what really works is always a nature-based solution. So that was really something that just struck me a few years ago as come on, always when it works, it's a nature-based solution. So it doesn't matter if it's improving soil health through compost or vermicompost. When you get the soil life, the diversity in the soil life, and the organic, if you can raise the organic matter level with compost application, with mulch application, so the plants become healthier, they give higher yields, they have less stress, less diseases. We don't use any pesticide on the farm, even not with the vegetables. A mulch application, nature-based solution, it's exactly what happens in the forest when everything that dies falls on the ground and then is slowly incorporated into the soil again. But also, if you think about functional biodiversity, so we have bird nests on the farm which deal with the mice. We have bats on the farm which deal with the bugs, and we have all the pollinators there because of our agroforestry system. So all of that is nature-based solutions. We have all the predators, the insect predators, the spiders, the birds. It's amazing how nature can help you grow high quality food.
Fantastic. Annette, you want to take a stab at that one too?
Sure. So, well, it depends a little bit what kind of a farm it is. So I would, depending on what you're doing. But I think like I said before, I think it's really important to always start things out of a passion and not because you think, oh, okay, I'm going to grow this because this right now, I think it's going to be successful. And as Alfred said, I actually, would build more diversity possible. And depending what kind of a farm it is, I would really look also into like a type of successional agroforestry, already looking at how climate change and how climate adaptation mitigation, and then just go from there. And I think it's always really cool if you're able to involve the community that's around you, because it's valuable for you, but it's valuable also for the exchange, and it really changes the place. And then in a way, it also builds your client base. But again, it really depends what kind of a farm, what you're farming. I mean, there's like a million things. So if you want to elaborate on what you're farming, but that's what I would say.
Great, thanks. I mean, we have 80 hectares here in Finland and looking to build a diverse regenerative farm. So I think really hearing about the vermicompost, the reverse osmosis with the olive fruit water, even post-processing on farm, I start to think about there's some infrastructure required for some of these things. And right now I'm exploring, different financing mechanisms and working with experts. So I think like that's a piece that I'd like to hear a little bit more about, building out some of these more elaborate pieces on the farm if it's something you do again and if you'd recommend.
Yeah, so of course, I mean, it added a new value stream for us to use the olive fruit water. And I think, but then again, we did this way into when everything else was already in place. So, like I said, keep it simple. I think, building a system that's regenerative, that, 80 hectares is not little, so, and go a little bit, making also these parcel where you do have different, different inputs in a way. And I think starting to immediately also think, okay, what is it that I'm passionate about? What is it that I want to do with this farm? Why am I doing it? And when taking in outside investors, look really well and what it is that they're asking, because my experience is that a lot of times you have to really look at the conditions, because a lot of times they expect something within a time frame that is just not sustainable, because there will be setbacks, so. And I think community, I really do think community is, super helpful. I don't know if that answers the part on, because I think before looking at the waste streams, I would be looking at, what am I building? And then obviously, composting, it's super, mulching is super. That's why I'm in love, if I would start over again, I would build a syntropic system, but that's me,
I think it's really validating. Thank you. And speaking about things that I'm passionate about, one of the other questions, if I may, Oliver, is thinking about packaging waste from the products that we sell from the farm. How do you and your enterprises think about that? Or how should we as farmers think about that as a potential revenue stream in and of itself in capturing that back on the farm for reuse or repurposing? So I can give you an example. We are starting with egg-laying hens, and I'm feeling guilty about the cardboard packaging that we're creating in the cartons. So I started to think, how can I capture that waste stream and repurpose it in making additional products? So I don't know if there's any examples in your activities or more generally in agriculture where farms are taking back packaging waste or minimizing packaging waste in their operations.
Well, I think you can always, depending on if you're selling the eggs, if people come to you and pick up the eggs, if you're selling them on the market, if you're selling them in a store. So it depends. So it's always great if you have direct consumer. That way they can bring you, you can reuse the cartons. Then there's, I mean, there's ways to use the cartons also in your vegetable beds, for example. But then again, you have to be careful because it depends what kind of cartons you're using. So, you know, but I think, yeah, creating packaging that is reusable is amazing. It always has a higher price point. And then you need to have the community or access to the community that it comes back to you in a way that it doesn't add more transportation, you know, because, you know, if transporting it back to you is really, you know, takes up a lot of, I don't know, resources, then maybe the carton is actually not that difficult, and maybe the people can use it at home to make paper mache or something like that. You know? So look at the whole cycle.
Alfred, do you have something to add to that? I'm sure you've tried to decompose a lot of waste products from different sources.
Yeah, cardboard actually easily decomposes, so it's not a problem. You can also feed it to the earthworms, actually. But as Annette already mentioned, it's important to know about the stuff that's in it. So is it made from what quality? Is it food grade quality, or is it recycled cardboard quality? Then it might be some bisphenol A in there, or some PFAS, or some nanoplastics. So that's always the question. And regarding financing, we have to finance everything ourselves, so we do not have the opportunity to talk to investors, actually. And I know there is a lot of rumors about, I'm also on LinkedIn, there is a lot of rumors about, impact investment and regenerative and investors and money. And I don't know anyone who been successful in taking the money. Just a second. My dog wants to go. So yeah, that's my contribution to the to the financing.
Stephen, while we've got you here, can you tell me a bit more about where you foresee your waste streams coming from? With a laying operation, is it mostly the things that you bring in through the packaging, through the feed sources? I assume if you're moving them around, the manure is not a waste source. What are you foreseeing here?
Yeah, I mean, just quickly off the cuff, I think like three ideas, right? I mean, the feed that we have comes in 500 kilo bags, similar to what like the fertilizer bags that you may be familiar with. So then we're thinking about how do we repurpose and reuse those. In fact, just down the road here in our local village, there's a company that collects them across Finland and makes, you know, products for resale out of those. So that's a great way to deal with that waste stream. Then we have the winter bedding from our hens. We're using the deep bedding method. So that's either straw or wood chips. We're going to test both this winter, and then understanding how are we going to compost that. That's why the conversation about regulations is super interesting, because we're right now having to navigate the regulations here in Finland on how to compost that. And I think the regulations are that it needs to be on some type of cement pad to prevent contact with the earth and managing water flows. And so, yeah, we're having to navigate this as well. And then the last is the packaging waste. And so, I mean, I'm thinking, looking at the data, 40% of municipal solid waste in Finland is recycled. I don't know what percentage egg cartons are recycled. I wouldn't want to take them back if I'm diverting them from a recycling stream. But if we can repurpose them in a meaningful way, that would be interesting. One of the things I was actually looking at was like fire starters or briquettes. So actually then working with not olive oil producers, but rapeseed oil producers, and introducing their leftover byproduct in with the egg cartons to then compress into some type of fire starter. So anyway, those are the three streams and how we're thinking about handling them on our farm.
Man, that's a really neat idea. And I like how Annette brought it back to the opportunity of recovering some of these products as a way of building community and loyalty from your customers as well. Have any of you got examples of how either managing packaging or some other farm resources have actually enabled or strengthened relationships with customers? Go ahead, whoever.
Well, yes, of course. I mean, we get our wine corks back in forms of all kinds of arrangements. No, yeah. Yes, of course it strengthens, especially the packaging. So we're very lucky in the sense that a lot of times people send us gifts made out of, for example, we still use a lot of printed brochures, like hard copy. And people then repurpose them and send them back to us with the ideas. Or, for example, the cartons that we have for our gift hampers, we get ideas for like one time I remember I got an instruction on how to make the carton box into a farm stall for his niece. And so he showed us how he did it, and then we shared that with other customers. So, these are smaller examples, but I think the idea is really that, that people then, repurpose things and then also share with you what they did with them, so you can also share it with other people.
This has been one of the biggest takeaways I've gotten from this panel is just how useful all of these different dialogues, some of with non-human members of the farm, have really contributed ideas and inspiration, not only for what to do with the products, but also how to fortify these relationships. Alfred or Stephen or whoever else is here, does anyone else have stories that can kind of reaffirm that, or maybe some other ideas that come up from this discussion around the relationships that have led to so much transformation into value?
Yeah, we are working also as a demonstration farm, so we do a lot of work with schools and kindergarten and so on, and it's always amazing to see how they react and how you can raise the awareness of them. So one way to make them the kindergarten, the very small children or ground school children, make them happy to touch the earth is, was das like, Milo, geh her da jetzt da. Bist du eine doofe Nuss? Na komm, aber schnell. What we do, because some children are afraid of earthworms. Not too many, but still. So we bring them together and then we explain them, listen, we have so many earthworms, we always forget the names. So can you help us, please? And rename them. And so then we have a bunch of earthworms there, and then the children have to pick the worm and say, okay, now you are Maria, and you are Carl. so it's really funny and it's really nice, because then they love the earthworm and they show them around everywhere, and they come, look, this is Lizzie. So it's really amazing there is no more being afraid of the earthworm, or and so it's really nice to get that relationship and to have that kind of experience, especially with young people.
I love that. I've really seen that when my nieces come to our farm for the summers, how quickly they adopt any life form on the farm as a pet and give it a name and show it off to everybody. I love that that's a way for them to connect with, yeah, maybe some entity that they were afraid of before and now they've grown to have some affection for. Stephen, you're about to say something.
Kind of in the same vein, I'm thinking about what language do you use to communicate the work that you do in recovering waste in the way that you do? I've heard this evening the concept of like closing loops or closed loops. Does the concept of circular economy resonate with you? Would you describe what you do as part of the circular economy, and how does that then resonate with your stakeholders and community more generally?
Yeah, I mean, definitely circular economy. I mean, that's how our farm is built, is a circular economy. That's how we communicate it. That's also what resonates with our community stakeholders and so forth. And closing loops also, to really, have the circle and just, yeah. And it's, I mean, I think that answers the question enough.
Yeah, with us, it's also important. So we use also mulch, for example, that we collect from the farm, and then we use it for increasing soil fertility on the fields beside of the compost and the vermicompost that we use in the garden. And we always do a lot of demonstration activity, but we also communicate to our customers. So we do a survey every year, beside of the emails that we get from the box scheme every week. But once a year we do a survey, and then we ask them kind of questions. Yeah, which vegetables did you like? What do you want to see more, and what do you want to see less, and things like that. But this year we also asked them how they think about the research activity that we do, how they think about the work that we try to mitigate climate change, that we try to adapt to climate change, we try to stop the loss of biodiversity, to regenerate the soil and everything. And it was really amazing to see how much people care. So how much our customers care about our work. I always thought more, okay, they are interested in the quality of the vegetables and the freshness and the seasonal approach and things like that. But they really, really care about all the work that we do additionally. And that's amazing. That's really cool to see, and it's heartwarming actually to see also on the market when we are at the farmers market in Vienna, like now in winter, when it was winter time, people came up with a cup of coffee in their hand, and they give it to you and say, thank you that you are here in this cold weather, you're still coming and offering your vegetables to us. And so it's really amazing how people come back with praising the quality of the vegetables. Yeah, last week I had the spinach and it was so good. And so that's really amazing to see what we can do actually on what impact that we can make with the work that we do on the farms.
I love all of these stories here. What really comes up for me is what I have been finding and communicating within the climate farmers community for a while is very few farms reach a scale where production on its own can keep them afloat through all of the fluctuations of what's going on. And especially smaller to mid-sized farms could really benefit by leaning into the few value propositions that they can really compete in the market on. And low prices and volume of production is never going to be one of those things. But telling your story and using it to create lasting relationships and community with it is absolutely one of the things that small to medium-sized farms can outcompete on. And that the business at La Viala is a real example of that. You mentioned in the beginning how you don't sell to resellers, and really there's only one way to get the goods there. And that is not because I would imagine it's the easiest way to sell things, but rather because that is a priority of investment in where you want your quality to go to. Can you talk a bit about how and why that sales stream was so important?
Well, it kind of, like so many things at La Viala, it started because the agricultural part of La Viala started, and then also the agriturismo. So the family had these houses that they renovated and then rented to visitors. And it was their idea where they said, oh, I really love your olive oil. I would love to have that, wherever they came from. And so that was the idea behind it. And over the years, I mean, in the beginning, it was literally that little trucks were loaded up and they went door to door in the beginning, because La Viala from the beginning was organic. And then some years later, biodynamic. So the markets actually in Italy during that time, in like the early 80s, nobody was really interested in it. So it was actually from Germany, from the Netherlands. And so they would drive from door to door. And then the family, we realized that by keeping the value stream with us, by not having a distributor that then takes a certain amount that then you're dependent on, it gives you a certain amount of freedom. Yes, it's true, to set it up is a little bit difficult, but it gives you, the value stream stays with you. And also what a lot of people, I mean, we've been talking about it now, what a lot of people underestimate is really the possibility to directly communicate with your clients. because that is what create. I mean, La Viala is really a community. I mean, one of the best examples was during COVID. People just, I don't know, just bought a lot of stuff from us because they realized that, you know, we couldn't open up to the guests, and they were like, yeah, you know, we really want to support you. And so they did that. Or when there are things going on, there is really a support and there's communication also, because they let you know, okay, we really love this and we don't like that. So even though it's difficult to set up, I think it really makes you more independent later on, you know, because a distributor always can say, oh, now I don't pay you X, I only pay you Y, you know, or now I don't need your stuff. And then in the end, you end up, you know, you need to find different streams. Whereas with direct client contact, it's a lot more, even though difficult to set up, it's a way to build community. And I think in food, community trumps everything, you know.
Yeah, certainly when brittle supply chains break down and so many other difficulties within the supply chains that we've seen happen. Alfred, you also maintain a close connection with the community that buys your stuff through those markets that you've mentioned. How has that helped to inform the direction and the priorities of what you produce?
Yeah, well, our main business with the vegetables is box shim, where we offer 3 different sizes of box and sell them every week or deliver them every week. People or customers have a subscription for 4 months or for a year. And as I already explained, we deliver 50 weeks a year. So beside of Christmas and New Year's week, we deliver every week, because we grow summer and winter vegetables as well. And that works out very well. It's anyway, yeah. So it's then difficult to let people choose what they want to see and what they do not want to see, because a lot of the stuff that they might not be too happy with still has to be grown to provide diversity, because we have like 5 to 7 different crops in the boxes every week. So it's difficult to say, okay, it's only tomatoes, only carrots, what people like. But it's also good because so a lot of our customers, they say, I want to be surprised actually, and we always give an email up front. It's just annoying. Da kommt sie, Sorry. Just wants to go out with me. Ah,
Well, look, Alfred, we won't keep you much longer. I know you got to get out there.
Kannst du den bitte rausgeben? Ja, bitte. Huh? Ja. Danke. Okay. No, you can go out. What was the topic?
No, you were talking about the ways that the community and the market with the box cubes is helping you to advance your business.
Yeah. Yeah, there are some crops that you can add to your plan, to your growing plan, but it's more difficult, yeah, for the customers to choose.
So I really love how many different stories and diversions came out of a simple question of what to do with the waste on your farm. The examples that both of you gave were super valuable, and I hope sparked some inspiration and some ideas for others out there. I want to thank you both so much for taking the time to speak with us, Aneta and Alfred. And as always, for your great questions, Stephen, man, it's a joy to have you here. I hope you guys have a great rest of your evening, and I look forward to seeing you on the next panel as well. Have a great evening, everyone. Thanks so much.
So
Thanks. Bye. Thanks.